I've been in rooms like that my whole career. Big hotel, open bar. Everyone in expensive clothes pretending they don't notice how expensive everyone else's clothes are. You learn pretty fast not to say much at these things. You find your seat, you listen, and you wait. Most of the time, nothing happens worth remembering. That night was different. My name is Rhett Calloway. I'm 54. I'm the director of capital compliance at Bridgepoint Capital out of Boston. My managing partner is Porter Sinclair, one of the sharper people I've worked with in 3 decades in this business. Porter doesn't call unless something matters. That night, I was the one who called him, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The event was Crestline Technologies' annual investor summit and signing dinner. Chicago, the Langham Hotel ballroom level, nice room. The kind where the lighting is soft enough that everyone looks a little more important than they probably are. About 200 guests, wait staff moving between tables like they rehearsed it. Jazz quartet in the corner doing their best to be heard without being noticed. I'd flown in from Boston that afternoon, read the full contract on the plane. All 94 pages. I do that every time, even when people assume I don't, especially when people assume I don't. Page 61 had a clause called the Leadership Conduct and Reputation Provision. It wasn't new language. I'd seen versions of it in a dozen deals over the years. Most people skim past it. It doesn't sound exciting. But I read it twice on that flight, because in my experience, the boring clauses are the ones that eventually matter. I got to the ballroom, found table 3, and sat down. My place card read R. Calloway, nothing fancy. I didn't bring an assistant, didn't wear a name badge. Just a charcoal suit and a glass of water I hadn't touched yet. The people at my table were polite enough. One guy glanced at me, smiled, looked away. A woman across from me leaned toward her colleague and said something quiet. I caught the word staff and let it go. People see what they expect to see. A 54-year-old guy sitting alone without an entourage doesn't exactly announce himself as the person this entire deal depends on. That's fine. That has always been fine with me. I could hear conversations from the tables nearby. Someone mentioned the deal closing tomorrow. Someone else said the number out loud, 2.3 billion. Then, assuming everything goes smooth, I folded my hands and kept listening. That's when I heard the chair scrape behind me. Footsteps, then they stopped right next to my seat. I looked up. He was tall, late 20s or early 30s. Well-dressed in the way that people are when someone else is paying for it. He looked at my face, then at the place card in front of me, then back at my face. A slow smile came up, the kind that doesn't mean anything good. Nolan Price. I recognized him from the company brief. Wade Price's son, the CEO's kid. Interesting, he said, mostly to himself. Then louder, just enough for the table to catch it. I think you're in the wrong seat. I looked at the card. R. Calloway. Then I looked back at him. Am I? He leaned in slightly. Yeah, he pointed toward the empty chair beside him. This seat is for my girlfriend. I didn't move. The table went quiet, not loud quiet, the polite kind, the kind where everyone is paying attention but pretending they aren't. Behind Nolan stood a woman in a silver dress that caught the light with every small movement. His girlfriend, I assumed. She had one hand resting on his arm and was looking at me the way you look at something left in a parking spot you already decided was yours. Nolan picked up my place card between 2 fingers, turned it, set it back down. That explains the confusion, he said. Does it? This VIP seat is for my girlfriend. He gestured toward her, like the whole thing should now be obvious. I'm sure there's somewhere else you'd be more comfortable. The woman tilted her head. I'm sure it's just a mix-up, she said, smooth and quiet. These events can get confusing, especially for people who aren't familiar with the executive section. Someone at the table shifted in their chair. Another guest set down his glass. I said it plainly. This seat was assigned to me. Nolan's smile thinned. You might want to check again. I did. The woman gave a small laugh, just enough for the table to hear. Maybe he's waiting for whoever he came with tonight. A few people nearby looked away, but not far. Moments like that pull attention in, and nobody wants to be the first to stop watching. Nolan leaned a little closer and dropped his voice. Look, I don't want to make this a whole thing. My girlfriend sits here. That's just how it is. I kept my hands flat on the table. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The music from the jazz quartet felt louder than it should have. Then Nolan straightened. His expression changed. Something shifted behind his eyes, the part of him that wasn't used to this. He turned toward the aisle. His voice came out flat and clear. Security? 2 guards looked up from across the room. Nolan pointed at me without hesitating. Remove him. The guards moved fast. That's the thing about authority in rooms like this. People respond to it before they stop to verify it. One of them stepped up beside my chair. Big guy. Polite enough about it, but firm. Sir, I'm going to need you to leave this seat. I looked up at him. This seat was assigned to me. He shifted his weight but didn't step back. Behind him, Nolan crossed his arms. You heard me. louder now, making sure the table caught every word. "That seat is taken." His girlfriend stood just behind his shoulder with the calm patience of someone watching a problem handle itself. "This really doesn't have to be dramatic," she said softly. Phones were up. I could see them in my peripheral. Not all of them, but enough, people recording. The event had been live-streamed to institutional partners since doors opened. I had seen the setup notice in the welcome packet. The guard tried again. "Sir, please stand. I'm already where I'm supposed to be." Nolan's patience ran out. He pointed at my chair. "He doesn't belong here." "Remove him?" The guard hesitated for half a second. Then his hand closed around my sleeve. My chair scraped loud against the marble floor as he pulled me to my feet. For a moment I stood there beside the table, in front of maybe 200 guests, like someone who had just been caught sitting somewhere he had no business being. A few people looked away. Most didn't. The phones kept recording. The guard let go once I was standing. I straightened my jacket slowly. Nolan looked satisfied. His girlfriend leaned close and said something to him. Then Nolan looked directly at me. "You got a problem, old man." I looked at him for a moment. Then I checked my watch. I didn't say a word. That's when I heard footsteps coming fast from the left side of the room. Iris Langley was Crestline's deputy general counsel. I had spoken with her twice during the due diligence process. She was the kind of lawyer who read everything and remembered most of it. She came through the edge of the crowd with Elliot Marsh right behind her. Elliot ran investor relations for Crestline. He had the look of someone who had just seen a fire start and was already calculating how big it was going to get. Iris didn't slow down. She walked straight to the guard who had pulled me from the chair. "Step back," she said. Not loud, not angry. Just a clear instruction with no room in it for another option. The guard stepped back. Nolan frowned. "This is unnecessary." He was sitting in the wrong. Iris raised one hand slightly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She turned to the table and to the guests nearby who were still watching. Then she picked up the place card in front of my chair. "R. Calloway." She held it up just long enough. Elliot stepped forward. He had the expression of a man doing math he didn't like the answer to. "Before this goes any further," he said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "I want to clarify something." He looked at the card. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the crowd around us. "This is Rhett Calloway, Director of Capital Compliance at Bridgepoint Capital." He paused for exactly 1 second. "He holds the final compliance authorization on Crestline's $230 billion closing." The table went quiet in a different way than before. Not the polite kind of quiet. The kind where people are recalculating. Nolan's expression didn't change right away. Then it did slowly, like a number he hadn't expected to see come up. His girlfriend took a small step back. A few people at nearby tables slowly lowered their phones. Others didn't. Wade Price had been standing at the edge of the VIP section for the last 30 seconds. I hadn't noticed him arrive. He was tall, mid-50s, the kind of face that had learned over decades not to show too much, but right now, it was showing something. He had walked in expecting to shake hands and walk on stage and announce the largest deal in his company's history. Instead, he had walked into this. His eyes moved across the scene, his son, the guard, the place card in Elliot's hand, the phones, the cameras on the ceiling. The live stream that had been running the whole time. He said one word, "Ethan." Then he caught himself. He straightened slightly. "Nolan." He said it the way you say a name when you want a conversation to stop before it gets worse. Nolan looked at his father. Something passed between them that I didn't need to hear to understand. Wade turned to me. His voice was careful. "Mr. Calloway, there's clearly been a misunderstanding here. I think it would be best if we stepped away from the floor and spoke privately." I looked at Iris. She gave a small nod. I picked up the folder I had set on the table when I first sat down. Nobody had noticed it until now. I had brought 2 documents with me from Boston. The full contract and a printed screenshot of the live stream feed, time-stamped, showing Nolan pointing at me, the guard's hand on my sleeve, and the phones raised all around the table. I had printed the screenshot at the Hotel Business Center about an hour before the dinner started. Not because I knew exactly what was going to happen, but because in 30 years of this work, I had learned that the clause on page 61 of a contract tends to matter most on the nights when somebody decides the rules don't apply to them. "Of course," I said, and we walked off the floor together. The executive lounge was a short hallway off the main ballroom, small room, round table, 6 chairs. Once the door closed behind us, the music disappeared completely. So did the polite smiles. Wade Price sat across from me. Next to him was Holloway, Crestline's CFO. Iris Langley took the chair to my left. Elliot Marsh stood near the door for a moment, then pulled out the last chair and sat down. Nobody spoke first. Wade folded his hands on the table. He looked at me the way executives look at problems they are trying to size up before deciding how to handle them. "Mr. Calloway, he said carefully, what happened out there was clearly a misunderstanding. I want you to know that what my son did does not reflect how this company operates or how we treat our partners. The word misunderstanding sat in the middle of the table. Everyone in that room knew it was doing a lot of work for a very small word. I didn't argue with it, I just opened my folder and placed the two documents on the table. The contract went down first. Then the printed screenshot of the live stream timestamped, showing Nolan pointing at me, the guard's hand on my sleeve, and the circle of phones raised around the table. Holloway recognized the contract immediately. His eyes went straight to it. Iris already knew what page I was going to. I turned to page 61 and set the folder flat. There is a clause in this agreement, I said, called the Leadership Conduct and Reputation Provision. Holloway leaned in. His finger moved down the paragraph as he read it silently. His expression tightened in the way that expressions do when the words are clear and the implications are worse. Wade watched him. What does it say? Holloway cleared his throat. He read it aloud, slowly. Any conduct by senior leadership or affiliated representatives that materially damages the reputation of the transaction during the closing period may trigger the investor's right to withdraw capital immediately. The room stayed quiet. Elliot shifted in his chair. Iris looked at the table. Wade sat back. He read the clause himself. Then he read it again. The look on his face was the look of a man who had signed a 94-page contract and was now realizing there were pages he had not finished reading. Affiliated representatives, he said slowly. Iris answered before I did. That includes family members publicly associated with leadership. Nobody said Nolan's name. They didn't need to. Wade exhaled. You're saying what happened at the table tonight is enough to activate this. I closed the folder. The sound of it settling on the table was the only noise in the room for a moment. That clause exists for nights exactly like this. Wade looked at the screenshot. He looked at the contract. Then he looked at me. The deal is supposed to close tomorrow morning, he said. It still could, I said. Holloway looked up fast. Wade studied me for a moment, recalculating. Walk me through how this works, he said. Your title, your role. Help me understand exactly where we are. My title is Director of Capital Compliance, I said. It's not a title that announces itself in a room. That's the point of it. In a transaction this size, Bridgepoint does not allow any single person, including Porter Sinclair, to release capital independently. There is always a final compliance authorization. Someone independent has to confirm that every condition of the agreement has been satisfied before the money moves. Holloway set down his pen, and that person is you. In this transaction, yes. Wade, let that sit for a second. The first tranche of Bridgepoint's commitment, the $2,030 billion, requires my sign-off. Without it, nothing closes tomorrow. Elliot leaned back slightly. The math was settling across the room. I tapped the screenshot lightly. Bridgepoint is the anchor investor in this deal. That's not just a title. It means the co-investment agreements signed by 3 other institutional partners contain automatic exit provisions tied to Bridgepoint's participation. If Bridgepoint withdraws, those 3 agreements don't need renegotiation, they terminate. Holloway closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them. So if you pull, he said quietly, we don't just lose Bridgepoint, we lose the structure. That's correct. Wade was very still. The kind of still that comes from years of learning how to control what your face does in a room. What do you need from us tonight? He asked. I'm not issuing an ultimatum, I said. That's not my job. My job is to verify that the conditions of this agreement have been met before capital is released. One of those conditions is the conduct provision. What happened on that floor tonight, on camera, on a live stream that was being watched by institutional partners in real time, is now part of the documented record of this transaction. Wade nodded slowly. He wasn't arguing, he understood. Give us until morning, he said. I'll convene the board tonight. We'll review the situation and respond formally. That's your right, I said. I stood up, picked up my folder, and straightened my jacket. Then I looked at Wade directly. You didn't move a person tonight, I said. You moved a deal. I left the lounge. Nobody tried to stop me. The hallway outside was quiet, just the muffled sound of the jazz quartet coming through the heavy ballroom doors. I stopped beside a window that looked out over the Chicago skyline, city lights running all the way to the lake. I took out my phone and called Porter Sinclair. He picked up on the second ring, Rhett. I need to report an incident, I said. I kept my voice level and described exactly what had happened. The CEO's son, the order to security, the guard's hand on my sleeve, the cameras, the live stream, the crowd. When I finished, Porter asked one question. Was it fully documented? I looked up at the security camera blinking from the ceiling above me. Entirely, I said. A short pause. Then we follow the provision, Porter said. I'll have legal draft the withdrawal notice tonight. I put the phone in my pocket and stood at the window for another minute. The city was still going. It didn't know or care what had just happened in that room. That was fine. I went back inside to finish my water. The email arrived at 6:47 in the morning. Holloway saw it first. He had been at his desk since 5, which told me the board meeting the night before had not gone well for anyone in that room. He read the message once, then again, then a third time, like the words might soften if he gave them enough chances. They didn't. Bridgepoint Capital formally withdraws its $2.3 billion capital commitment to the Crestline Technologies transaction, effective immediately. He printed it. Walked down the hall, set it on Wade's desk without saying anything. Within 20 minutes, the executive conference room was full. Directors joining by phone from hotel rooms, from homes, from cars. A few had stepped away from the tail end of the dinner the night before to get on the board call and had never really gone to sleep. Wade stood at the head of the table and read the email in silence. Nobody spoke because everyone in that room understood what one paragraph meant. The anchor was gone. And when the anchor goes, everything tied to it goes with it. One director said it quietly over the speakerphone. If Bridgepoint is out, the co-investors trigger automatically. Another voice. The banks won't close without anchor capital in place. Holloway set the printed email on the table. I've already heard from 2 of the 3 co-investors this morning. They're reviewing their exit provisions now. The third hasn't called yet, which probably means their legal team is already drafting. Someone asked how fast the market would hear about it. Iris answered from the far end of the table, it's already moving. Clips from last night were circulating in investor group chats before midnight. By the time the street opens, the analysts will have done the math. She was right. Crestline opened down 11% that morning, not a rumor drop. A number based on total exposure. Bridgepoint's $2.3 billion, plus the 3 co-investor commitments that unwound behind it. When you add it all up, the market did what markets do. It priced in the reality before the company could get ahead of it. By 10 in the morning, the board had made 2 decisions. The first was to issue a formal statement acknowledging the withdrawal and citing an internal review of governance practices. No specifics, clean language. The second was about Nolan. His title at Crestline had been Vice President of Strategic Development. A real title this time, not honorary, though the role had always been defined loosely enough that nobody outside the family was quite sure what it actually covered. The board voted to remove him from all public-facing functions, effective immediately, pending the outcome of the internal review. Wade did not fight it. I heard about both decisions from Elliot, who sent me a short email around noon, professional, factual, no editorializing. I appreciated that about him. At 2:14 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Wade Price, I answered. He spoke for about 90 seconds. Something about issuing a clarifying statement to the market. Something about the situation being addressable if there was still a path to conversation. His voice had the careful control of a man who had spent 30 years building something and was now watching a piece of it come apart faster than he could manage. I let him finish, then I said nothing. After a moment, I ended the call, put the phone in my jacket pocket, and went to get coffee from the cart in the lobby of the building across the street. The good kind. The kind you order when the day is already done and you just need something warm in your hand while you think. I stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes. Chicago in the morning after a long night has a particular kind of quiet to it. Not peaceful exactly, just settled, like the city already knows what happened and has moved on. I flew back to Boston that afternoon. A week later, I was at my desk. Standard Tuesday. Stack of agreements waiting for review. Coffee going cold the way it always does when you actually have work to do. One of the junior analysts stopped in my doorway. He had heard the story going around. These things travel fast in this industry, faster than the deals themselves sometimes. So you're the guy from the Chicago thing, he said. I didn't confirm or deny. I just looked at him. When did that deal actually die? He asked. Like, what was the actual moment? I thought about it for a second. The moment someone in that room decided respect was optional. He nodded slowly, not sure if that was the answer he expected. I picked up the next file. 30 years in this business, I said. The ones who last, they never confuse a name tag with a net worth. He stood there a second longer, then walked off. I went back to work. If you have ever walked into a room and been looked through instead of looked at, you know exactly what that table felt like. Not because of the money, because of the assumption. The quiet decision someone made before you opened your mouth that you did not belong where you were sitting. Most people move, they apologize, they find another seat and tell themselves it was not worth the fight. Here's what I know after 3 decades of watching deals come together and fall apart. The ones who stay seated are not being stubborn, they are being accurate. They know something the room does not know yet. You do not have to announce yourself. You do not have to argue. You do not have to raise your voice or make a scene. You just have to know what page 61 says and wait. If this story hits something real for you, pass it on to someone who needs to hear it. The world has plenty of Nolans. It needs more people who already read the contract.